Got it. Folks, please welcome Ashia Ajani.
Yay, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I actually really do enjoy reading for smaller crowds. I feel like it's like more intimate and we can have like conversations if folks want about the work. I do love like affirmation in the chat, like when we're in a virtual space, or if you do have questions or if you'd have comments or feedback about the poems, definitely feel free to put those in the chat or come off of mute. I feel like we can have like a little bit more like chill vibes with it since we got a smaller group. But yeah, thank you so much, Mike, for having me. Yanina, it's great to see your face. Thank you for all the correspondence. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into this. So initially, I like to end my set with this poem, but I've actually been realizing starting it, I think lays like a really great foundation. It's the shortest poem in the collection, and it's called Nature Documentary. It goes like this. Humans are the ringmasters of paradise. Problem is, these showmen cannot perform without circusing the wandering black bear of my heart. I didn't intentionally spurn the forest. Rather, it became another question of Southern belonging I didn't have the patience to unravel. Must have been when the little white kids next door asked if we wanted to play cowboys and Indians. All I could think about was a split in my conquered DNA that stood on both ends of the chastening rod. Or maybe when a man held a shotgun to the back of a good man's head while we were out in the field, asked, "Whose land you think you on, boy?" Neither of ours. We just learned to love it because it was the only thing that granted us some semblance of peace. Cousin says he has encountered poisonous snakes in the Panamanian jungle, and this scared him less than doing research in the deep south. Snakes are usually more frightened by you than you are of them. Same goes for white folks, but Lord, how I prefer a fang to those trigger fingers. I didn't intentionally spurn the darkness until they claimed ownership of that which once sheltered us. When all that was hunt and run soaked my endings in bloodlust through this violent cat and mouse condition. The inherent trickery of my blood begged me to stay grounded when all I could imagine was flight. The voices in these woodlands are alive with vengeance. Maybe this is why white people fear the dark and what it holds. We marvel at its ability to hold. Call it semantics, a cultural linguistic loophole, our right to something. Abuela weaves together sweet tales about the backwoods that were once hers, long after the plantation manifestation made a mockery of her inheritance. The trees held their secret with rope and flame. I can't help but envision my abuela laughing, running not from any one thing, but towards the witching hour our foremothers once found refuge in. Mississippi is a graveyard of all my kin's wildest ambitions. We play pretended Americanness until it felt real enough to sink into, until it didn't defend us from the light, until the superfund affliction reminded us of the savagery in our marrow. I flee from what my ancients trusted, and isn't that the most heart-wrenching betrayal of my blood? To deny myself access to the blackest parts of this earth. My great-great-great-grandmother's phantom footsteps litter the ground like dead leaves, and isn't this what this lineage always returns to? An ill-understood trauma of existing in between shadow and soul? What is the difference between haunting and protecting a place? Is it one of volition? The wounds down here are older than the flesh that displaced them, but the twilight reminds me that we could feel whole yet. Black people in the South breathe life into dark and call it home. Black as the soil that birthed bright cotton, this Mississippi Delta madness home, this wild, expansive blackness home. Mississippi baby, on my good days, I imagine you soft, lazy, draped in gracious green, sacred darkness, cradling all that unloved Black. So as you might be able to tell from that poem, my mom's side of the family is from Mississippi, and a couple of folks are still there. And I mean, Nina Simone wrote Mississippi Goddamn for a reason. And I think there's still a lot of change that needs to happen in Mississippi, but it's also a place of my childhood. And I think a lot of what this collection is me grappling with a lot of contradictions that I've experienced about my relationship to place, and especially to the outdoors as Black folks. I think oftentimes people like to say that Black folks don't like going outside or that we don't do that kind of stuff. No, it's like dangerous for us to do that kind of stuff. So oftentimes we're denied access to those spaces because it's much safer to be in a city rather than in the woods and somebody catches you slipping. So, but then I also think, you know, about being a kid running around, like climbing trees, like, you know, making like weird like mushroom like potions with my cousins, unfortunately terrorizing the wild turkeys that were around, you know. And so like I have these really fond memories of this place that is filled with so much history. And so that's what like a lot of the poems in this collection speak to. I think the next one that I will do, I like to do ones, I kind of like to, like almost like a DJ, I like to kind of like bring you low and then bring you high and then like, you know, do a little bit of playing around with emotions. So this next one, this is a pandemic poem. We all have one pandemic poem. And during lockdown, during like 2020, I was smoking so much weed that at a point I was like, this cannot continue, because there was nothing else to do. Like, you know, like there's nothing else to do. Like I was working from home, like, you know, I didn't have anywhere to go. And I realized at some point I knew that it was bad when like my regular weed guy, like it was like the way that he would just interact with me, like, oh, I'm going to Ashia's place. And I'm like, okay, you know, like this is too much. So I wrote a poem about like the weed man being like the only guy, like, and like really the only person that I was seeing for a few months during the pandemic. And it's after one of my favorite queer rappers, Mickey Blanco. I grease myself with lip gloss and lotion. Perhaps a little blush will conjure color courage to go sit in this man's Honda for the third time in 2 weeks. The weed man is the only man to ever see me with my scarf on. I dip and toe a green line. The intimacy of purchase lingers want on my lips. Yes, this too is heady. In the evening time, I upcycle heartbreak, try on a new facade of sexy cool meant to bring back bliss. Eyes low, I coax memory to rewrite itself through a wrapped fatty and weighty conversations like, did you know so-and-so died? Ash fell from the sky when he didn't deserve. The doctor says, rent is up another $175, so let me get a half ounce of anything that will pull my mind back from the brink of no return. Eager to oblige, Weed Man hands me a bag of indigo to evince a night sky from beyond my wildest emptiness. Both of us Black and hustling, rife with dreams of soulmates evergreen. Heartache notwithstanding, he beholds my blessings everlasting. Lovers come and go, but this, this is something sacred. I don't know where my paycheck ends and his begins, but I love the idea of being tethered to something. I'm a shapeshifter eroded by grief. Render my tenement hollow. Let the fullness of me idle below an unceded frontier to conquer. I call myself a before, simply ungrounded. How I began, not like this. All right. This next poem, so I just love, one of the things that I just love Black people. I love us, I love what we do, I love how we carry ourselves. I love the musicality, the way that we walk, I love how we style ourselves. And so this poem is an ode to the do-rag. Forward moving, we always turn back time. Like ocean, built of body memory, the God of good grease paints follicles holy in those waves. Lord, those ancient waves facilitate a brother's boldest baptism, wipe me down, a litany of all the good that came to stay. The Atlantic remembers every part of Black anatomy, like a curse, a calling. Those cold waters shift and stagnate under a cotton polyester blend. They never got to lay claim to the water, but by God, how they dammed, privatized, seized, overfished, extracted, deregulated, poisoned, commodified, pulled the cloth from the crease quick, like a run in a stocking, ripped the color clean from scalp. An instantaneous divide reminds what can be taken, and what can be absolved. Later, a Black boy will fit his mouth around the word rage, hold it behind his tongue, ferment his brooding into savagery. Watch him pull bones from the riverbed, casting wide mesh drenched in cotton coagulations. Pray for summer rain to rinse all these trifling transgressions clean. Any flood breaks a bullet's back but does not siphon the blood back into body. Baby, I can't help but enshrine you as a vengeful sea god, drowning in all that drip, all that wet, all that sheen. So this next poem, let me see. This next poem that I'm gonna do, so I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. And again, this book is very expansive in terms of geography. It's very much about like migration and like ecological and like cultural erosion, but also memory. And so I don't know if anybody here has ever been to Denver, Colorado, or knows folks. Yeah, okay, so a couple nods here and there. Like the Bay Area, Denver has undergone a lot of change in a very short amount of time. And of course, it's, it's the OGs, it's like the people, the working folks who are pushed to the side. It's the artists who are neglected. And then people are like, why do these buildings look like this? Or like, why is this happening? It's because you kicked out all the artists. That's why it like looks like this. And so I don't know if anybody's ever been to Slam at Denver or like a performance, but one of the things we say is like by Ted Vaca. He started it like Denver, Queen City of the Plains. For in you we live and are loved. And that's the epigraph for this poem. It's called a plosive, which means that you take a letter, I think it's usually D, P, B, M, or G, maybe L, I think too. And then every letter or most letters of the poem start with that word. So it's like very like alliteration like. So this is plosive for Denver. Denver, my devil dear, didn't you defeat yourself from jump? Didn't you define yourself from get? Dios me, damned by definition, deliciously divine, done tempted me to stray, dry Dixieland. Darling Denver, didn't you debut dutifully? Deep durazno summertime skies, dandelion debauchery dominated by delight. Denver, you are a desperate decomposer. Didn't you warn me of my own deflowering? Diminishing daydreams, dour drought, a damaging city's deception persists. Dedicated OGs discerned your Domingo deliverance, doping your devotees due to deceitful decolonization. Demented dualities dish daggers desired by development. Yet still so dynamic and dreamy, delinquents dangle from your dreads. Disastrous in your delectability, Denver, I dance with you at a distance. Displacers disturb deities, denote dents in your dirty dim dusk. So drunk you are in your delusion, dog. Denver wears a dashiki to a jazz festival, decides herself dapper. Discordant chords demolish pipe dreams. Denver dayflower, don't demarcate me, deadweight. I wiped my shoes on your dank doormat, your decay stuck to my digits. Deracinated by damnable design, dear Denver, don't disregard my diatribes. It's my duty to disparage your disappearing decision. Your dispossessed have come to collect your debt. I'm actually going to Denver a couple weeks from now. My mom still lives there, and so I like to visit her. And also I have like a very special place in my heart for Denver. I've lost my ability to withstand the altitude because I've been gone for so long. It's like a little bit of like a crisis for me because I was like, oh man, I used to be able to hike and go and do whatever I wanted to do. I guess, I know that I have some time, but I'll pause there. I don't know if folks have like questions or want to say something, since we're a little bit of a smaller group.
You are an absolute delight, Ashia. Seriously. And Denver is a really magical and strange place. I have featured at the Denver Mercury probably 5 or 6 times. And I remember, I'll never forget, walking in one day and somebody saying, "Oh, have you seen Andrea Gibson perform yet?" And I'm like, "Nope, never heard of them." No. And then I saw them and it was like, it was like, "Oh, okay, there's poetry. There it is. All right." And Slam Nuba, like, I've been all over Colorado and yeah, it's great. So I could see why you would have there'd be a big place in your heart for it.
Yeah, it's a dope place. Wow, and like what a great like introduction or like slice of Denver, seeing Andrea Gibson at Merck Cafe. That's like
in 2004.
Yeah, that's like iconic Denver right there.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. I don't know if anybody else has questions or comments. I can read more poems.
What brought you here from Denver? What brought you here from Denver?
Work. So my day job, my official title is Climate Resilient Schools Educator. I work with an organization called Mycelium Youth Network, and we do climate justice programming for climate vulnerable schools and neighborhoods. Really the purpose is to help redistribute funds back to communities so that they can build up their own grassroots programming to withstand and, be resilient during climate crisis, but definitely work. I've been loving it. A lot of really cool, I've learned a lot of really great, like kind of like progressive top of the line climate knowledge and, TEK and being able to work with like Segurite Land Trust and visit like Planting Justice. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Do you have a climate poem?
Do I have a climate poem? I do have a climate poem. It's actually, I have a lot of climate poems. It's actually not in this collection, but it's online. I'll put the link in the chat. And I actually haven't read this one. This is one of my favorite ones to read out loud. And I haven't done it in a while. So I'm gonna go ahead and find it. It's called, so I've never lived in New York, but I have a lot of friends in New York. And it's, the poem is titled Chafing in Crown Heights, because I did not realize how bad humidity could be until I like spent like a summer in New York. And it's not even like just the humidity, it's like the mix of like dirt and humidity and like lack of like, AC and things. I put it, okay, let me see. No, I haven't. Here, I'll put it in the chat.
We also have a question in the chat about how long have you been writing poetry?
Yeah, for a while. I mean, I feel like it's like very like typical, like, poet response to be like, oh, like ever since I was like a little kid, I love like writing poems. I was very much like that. Like I'm a Gemini, I love to talk. And so like writing and poetry and creative writing was my way of like talking. And I was an only child too. So it was my way of talking when my mom was like, please journal. It's just like, you ain't got anybody else to talk to. So yeah, it's just been a way for me to like process for a really long time. But I started doing slam in high school. I was on Minor Disturbance, Denver Youth Poetry Slam team. And then I continued in college and yeah.
Well, it's perfect that you're working with youth. I was actually thinking during your Denver poem that your poetry reminds me of Sesame Street, some of the stories that I read with the kids, except not.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would love to. Yeah, I do a lot of youth workshops, youth organizing. I love, definitely love working with young people.
But we'll let you get back to the poetry now. I think that's what everybody wants to hear is your poetry.
Thank you. I also have another question. I'll read the poem but it connects really well to the question. So I'll read the poem and then I'll answer the question. So, Chafing in Crown Heights. Mira, if you take the climate crisis too personally, you will never be happy again. What white women call climate grief, I call the ghosts of colonialism come to reclaim uninherited earth. Everybody's telling me how to react, but nobody's telling them how to act. Won't a Black drag queen tell you about yourself, shadow and all, send you running home crying to your mama about all that spoiled potential, all that summer stink oozing out open wounds? Tell the truth? I can't tell if I want to survive the event. Regardless, the event survives in me, my flesh an inalienable reminder of splendor unearned. I promise, I tried to be good, but I suppose I done sweated out all the goodness in me. From a 6-story walk-up, on and on croons out an AC unitless window. The world keeps turning, oh, what a day, what a day. Miss Badu, I know you like your Black girls quiet, legs closed, but in this Crown Heights smoke, exhaust, and wet air, I've got to spread my thighs and let some coolness wipe me clean. Sponge the clock spotless from sweet and sticky summer steam, heap boasting, beautifully Black tender, write sweet magic songs, decadent rolling love poems sent from sunbeams, sent from sunbeams, sent from sunbeams. Black as I am, what a day in me. I was hot. I was just hot and just angry. And so a lot of that came out of that. I also have another climate poem called Fragmentation. I'll read that one too. But someone asked, what made you want to inject green thought into poetry? I think honestly, growing up in Denver, I lived at a very interesting intersection of very urban, but also very I had access to a lot of environmental spaces. I spent a lot of time outside, especially in the summer. When I was hanging out with my cousins, there were a lot of us running around. And so my grandma was just like, there's a field out there, go on, go on and do something, and enjoy yourselves. And so just a lot of inquiry and wonder. I've always had a very active imagination. And in college, I did environmental studies because that was something that I was really passionate about. I love learning about science, ecology, how things are connected. And then, of course, I had always been really attuned into the justice side of things. And some stuff that really bugged me was especially learning family stories, because we were part of the Great Migration up north, where people went to go work in Ford and auto facilities and stuff. We would talk about, in these classes, we would talk about, oh, car industry is so bad because it's so polluting, but we never really talked about the people who are getting cancer from working on the lines. We weren't really talking about why people are moving in such big swaths. So I wanted to think more critically about well, what are we really upset about when we're upset about a lot of environmental decline? In a lot of ways, we're really upset about racism and colonialism, and just thinking about the relationships between those things. A little mix of both, Deborah. So slam definitely, I was in community with a lot of other writers, so I didn't do any formal MFA. I took a couple creative writing classes here and there. I read a lot, again, only child, so I had to entertain myself a lot. So I read a lot, explored a lot. I would say also music is a big influence in my work too. So yeah, a little bit of mix of them. Yeah, absolutely. Environmental racism, environmental injustice, colonialism. These are things that, yeah, just really stress me out. I think about a lot. All right, I have another climate change poem for you all. And it's called Fragmentation. It's not in the collection. And then I'm also going to read Life Cycle, which is kind of one of my favorite poems in the collection that I think is a good summation of environmental injustice and environmental inequity over history. If I can find this poem, let me see.
But before you do that, when is your birthday?
My birthday is May 22nd. When's yours?
Oh, June 5th. Hey,
oh, happy belated.
And then I love the reference to Badu. She's going to be here soon. I don't know if you know that. But
Yeah, I saw. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. I think I might actually be out of town for it. I saw her at Afropunk, Brooklyn. That was very transcendent. All right. Okay, I'm gonna see. I can't find it. Oh wait, no, I found it. All right. So this one is called Fragmentation, and I was actually writing this one when I was living in California, and I think you might be able to tell. I can live on the coast no longer. The cost of living and the sea levels are rising, so is my mother's blood pressure. Her nerves are shot. When we check the weather reports for some folklore of routine, the meteorologists tell us that New York City is now considered a subtropical zone. The rich women in the village call it brunch weather, while Harlem sweats 5 degrees hotter, and everybody and their mama want to relocate to Denver. Migration stays moving inward, a sort of post-colonial colonization or climate refugeeism. They say it's better to be homeless in California, but even the sun became enraged, sweltered entire populations from existence. Besides, you can't prosecute a heat death. Bewitched by the delusion beyond the deluge, these wicked walls closing in closer and closer, Anthropocene, Petrocene, Plantationocene, whatever you want to call it, can a name repair the stitch? Fingers sink in an enduring wound, spread blood palm to broken cells, plasmalized, bereft, the open secret crumbling before our very eyes. All right. So this next poem, this is like my favorite poem in the collection. It's called Life Cycle. And as I was speaking to a little bit earlier, I think a lot about choice and like lack of choice, especially when it comes to jobs. I was speaking to my Auntie Janice this past summer because her cancer came back. She worked on the assembly lines for like 20 something years at Ford. And I was talking to her because she had cancer before. And she said that nearly everybody that she knew who worked in her unit had some form of cancer. And if they got it treated and they were in remission, if they came back to work, it wouldn't be 2 years until their cancer came back. So this was a poem really grappling with that. America is a factory. My father builds security cameras from discarded junk phones, their cracked screens, subterranean stained glass burgeoning blessings. Come one, come all if you dare. He welds a fine line between surveillance and security. My father is no stranger to a gun. My father believes in a self-proclaimed rapture. The hills have eyes. My father's lenses thicken as his vision differs, defers. At the end of the world, he hopes to patent his despair. America is a landfill. Underwater bloodline brined, it's soured. My neighbor pours the leftover liquid from a pot of greens into his garden. Billowing green stink arises, stains room for ripening. Black folks despise waste. The last drops of crown peach in the dog's water bowl for taste. The plastic bags under my auntie's kitchen cabinet, exceptional cushioning for our endangered shadows. Never afforded the softness of packing peanuts. Is the soul biodegradable? Can it be upcycled? At least we still have Granny's house. Wrap your apparitions in polyester coves, send them out to ocean. May they forever exist in sedimentary purgatory, floating on. In this sense, we never rest. In this sense, pollution profits. And won't these white folks come and pick up the damn trash? America is a false idol, all my people iconoclast. Look out the window at all that, goddamn, what is he protecting? Ain't nothing here ours but scraps of metal melted all down, why don't you? Some homes are worth less than their copper pipes, this metallic stew pot boiling over. My ancestors bartered their gold teeth for green, earned heart disease and curdled cream dreams instead as the planet warms another degree. Mama says my degree won't save me. Suppose cash really does rule everything around me. I wonder, what rich bones can broth a new vanguard? America is a malignant tumor. Oh, how I long to capitalize this intrusion in our collective heartbeat, beating away at the floorboards of good senses until the spirits rattle around, pushing daisies. Memory stinging nettle unsilenced. Watch the good earth reclaim clunkers for cash. Nostalgia makes a mockery of present. The open-faced sores on my uncle's knuckles attribute to this nation's success. I won't bullshit you. He reeks of burnt sienna and ember. It all reeks of pyrated pyrite, fool's gold. I talk too much about my grandmother's hands because they threshed this country. Great migration granny, built Ford tough. A gorgeous ghost gnarled into graphics. Look closely. You can see flakes of calluses soldered to your car's lithium battery. I talk too much about my grandmother's hands because they became cracked by bleach, ammonia, everything meant to whiten and purge bacteria. She passed down her genealogy of anguish, lead heart and blood, black lung coughing up embattled blues. Wasn't the Tin Man just chopping through scorched earth too? My gut is filled with vengeful microorganisms. Today and every day beyond grief, I throw my grease against any surface in need of shine. America, define yourself a country exactly. My offering, a knotted bellyache of sadness born beyond a destined horizon, manifested. The embers of our lost selves tumbling across the West Coast. Even the mountains seem to collapse with sadness. The spine of the uninherited earth curved like that of a funeral wailer. And it's a simple, I messed it up. I messed up the lines. Even the mountains seem to collapse in sadness. The spine of the uninherited earth curved like that of a funeral wailer. An assembly line aggravating access. All that rust corroding our good sense. Riddle me this. How can I be well when my lawn is always burning?
Wow. Oh, what a line to end it on too.
Yeah.
Dang.
This was a hard one to like finish, to stop writing, because it just, I mean, I think that's why I ended it on that line, because it was just like, it's just constant, like, you know, it's just like something to constantly deal with. Yeah.
That's staccato too. You know who that reminds me of? You know who does that really well as well is Tongo Ison Martin. You know Tongo? Yeah. Tongo, I mean, he'll just rattle off for like 9 minutes straight, you know. I say, I say go for it.
Yeah. I love a good epic poem. I do.
Yeah.
I love keeping it going.
It's funny. I have this poem that was 7 pages long, and it was like an 11-minute read, you know, and then I somehow cut it down to 2.5 minutes.
Whoa.
Because so much of it was so bad, you know, so much of it was so bad. I just took out all the bad lines, and I had like 2 pages left. Question for you. So you, how has, in terms of putting together this collection, how long have you been in Oakland?
I've been in Oakland, honestly, on and off for like 3.5 years. Yeah, I've been kind of bouncing back and forth.
What a time to move to the Bay too. Jeez. Yeah. And so does Oakland, does the East Bay in any way, like even, does it feel like home yet?
Yeah, it does. I think like part of me at least is like feeling like a place feeling like home is like if I go to like my local coffee shop and they already know what I'm gonna order and they smile and they're just like, oh, it's great to see you. And that like finally started happening, which is really awesome. And I work with amazing people. I mean, poetry scene here is just so expansive and so beautiful. And I'm always meeting like amazing people. So yeah, it does feel like home now.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's incredible. And now, have you been influenced in terms of your writing? Like how much of what's in this collection was written in the time that you've been spending in Oakland?
Yeah, kind of like, because it was back and forth, a few poems and for like different ways. So I spent the pandemic in Berkeley. The first year. I was living in South Berkeley, and that was like where the Weed Man one came from, because like you can get delivery here. And a couple more that are like later in the collection. Like I have one of the poems that I close with is called Return, Return. And it's basically me kind of like being like, wow, it seems as though my family has been like Mississippi, Detroit, Denver, Oakland. Where is there to go? You know, beyond that, it feels like this constant running. And so it's like thinking about that. And then I'm working, because again, I'm a glutton for punishment and I can't turn it off. I'm working on a second collection, and a lot of that deals a lot with California. I will say I also do nonfiction. I do a lot of essay writing, and a lot more of my essay writing is very much like West Coast based. I think because a lot of my research that I did in college was in Santa Cruz. So you know, I'm like very familiar with like geography and ecology and stuff of the region. Yeah,
it's and there's such a wide range of it too throughout, you know, from Monterey to Monterey to the North Peninsula as well, right?
Yeah.
And then the Delta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I like when I talk to my students, we do like kind of like a little bit of a quiz in the beginning, and I ask them like, what is the most biodiverse place in America? And I give them a couple options, and they never pick California. Growing up here, like they never pick California. California is the most biodiverse state, and it's one of the most biodiverse states or places in the world. Which is which I mean, even also in terms of the people who live here, you know, it makes sense.
Well, I mean, living in the South Bay, I think we've always, I mean, you grow up kind of knowing that, you know, if you're lucky, there's, you know, some sort of fruit tree in every backyard, you know, just because all the houses were built on old orchards. And so everyone ended up with something. I mean, gosh, we can grow anything here. There's so much wildlife. The Bay Area is a bird sanctuary, an ancient bird sanctuary. Birds making pit stops on their way south, on their way east, you know. I mean, it's a really interesting place.
It's cool stuff.
So I'm already feeling like we need you for some workshops down here. We need you for, you know, so yeah, we're definitely gonna talk. Let me read this. Oh, I'm gonna put this in the chat now. I'm gonna put this in the chat. So here is, you can order Ashia's books. Order Ashia's book right there. That's the Barnes and Noble link to your book, and then your website link underneath there. So go click on those now, folks, while I read the remainder of the bio you may not know about Ashia Ajani. Writing as a queer Black femme, Ashia works to preserve, interrogate, and imagine how the Black diaspora has shaped and continues to shape land stewardship in the Western Hemisphere. Ashia has been published in Sierra Magazine, Atlas&Alice Magazine, The Journal, Sage Magazine, Them.us, and the Hopper Literary Magazine, among others. Ashia released a first chapbook, We Bleed Like Mango, in October of 2017. Their debut full-length poetry collection, Heirloom, will be published in spring 2023. It's been published through Right Bloody Publishing. Go click that link, go buy that book, and then buy a gift for a friend. Get one for Venus, because it was her birthday. As an environmental justice educator with Mycelium Youth Network, Ashia believes in the power of participatory action, research, and cultural organizing in order to adapt and mitigate the ongoing climate crisis. Ashia believes in the transformative power and the imaginations of Black and Brown youth to shape our ecological futures. As a book reviewer, Ashia seeks exhilarating language that makes life possible. You also have exhilarating language, Ashia, and I think we are all very lucky to have gotten to experience your work this evening. I do wish that we had a larger audience for you tonight, but you know what? There's more to come. So you are, again, a delight and very easy to listen to and to take in. And there's so much. There's so much to take in and so much to process from what you've given us tonight. Thank you for teaching us a few things. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Wonderful reading. Before we completely close out, do you have time for a couple more questions that were in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Actually, I kind of half answered one. Heirloom is, Venus asked about the title. And I really think I gave like a really quick summary, like type one. But Heirloom, I think of it in a couple of ways, just like in terms of like family inheritance, but also like earth inheritance, like what kind of earth have we inherited? And then like what kind of earth are we passing down to future generations? What kind of knowledge are we passing down? What kind of knowledge gets lost when you're like constantly running from something, when you're constantly just like trying to survive? But also in that survivability, what are like things that we learn? What are things that we grow from? What are things that we're able to endure and change and make work in our favor? So Heirloom like kind of like has like a few meanings. And then I do have a poem in there about Heirloom, which is basically me being like, why did the bus go up 25 cents when it's like a resource that like everybody needs? And why are you mad at people like train hopping? Like chill. So that's where like the title comes from.
Awesome. And everybody loved your reading so much. We want to know if you read regularly at any other places, like in Oakland or wherever.
Yeah, so I might be back at Berkeley Slam. I need to check in with Tino, because Tino's a good friend of mine. And I was at Oakland Slam. I do some stuff with Rich Oak. We're trying to kind of get Poetry Garden. I did a couple readings at Daydreams, or excuse me, at Nightmare, Medicine for Nightmares. Oh my gosh, the series is called Daydreams and Nightmares. I did like some things at Medicine and Nightmares. I was at Bay Area Book Festival, which was my first festival, which was really cool. Yeah, I like kind of like wherever. I was at Rivertown with Sandra, who's like lovely. I read with D. Allen at Lyrics and Dirges in Berkeley. That was really fun. It was really great to meet him and hear his work. And I think there's like a lot of similar themes, between our works, which is like really awesome. But yeah, I'm all over. I'm local, so I'll be here.
Wonderful. So if you can go see her in person, go see her in person. And if not, you can definitely order the book, as I cannot put the links in the chat. So any last words? Otherwise, I will go ahead and stop the recording now. We're good. Thank you so much, Ashia.
Thank you
Wonderful
all.
reading.
I can't wait to hear your work.
Thank you.